I never thought my own family would treat me like a stranger in my own house. Not after everything I'd done. Not after the decades I'd spent making this place a home. But that afternoon, when I opened my bedroom door and saw my daughter-in-law sitting on my bed, surrounded by boxers that weren't mine, I understood something had shifted forever. The curtains were half drawn, and sunlight fell across the floral quilt I'd sewn with my late husband. She didn't even look startled when I walked in. She just turned her head slightly, a faint smirk on her face, and said in a flat voice, "This is mine now." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. I stood in the doorway, gripping the handle a little too tightly. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out the ticking clock in the hallway. Mine. The word echoed in my chest like a slap. My room wasn't just for walls. It was the only piece of this house that still felt like me. I glanced at the boxers, her clothes, her perfume. Even her shoes were neatly lined up beneath my dresser. My wedding photo, the one with the faded blue frame, was lying face down on the floor. She hadn't even bothered to put it aside gently. "Excuse me," I finally managed to say, my voice shaking but cold. She crossed her legs and looked at me, the way someone might look at a stranger interrupting their peace. "Well, we need more space now. You've got the guest room. It's better this way. Better this way." The words sliced through me like glass. My son wasn't home. Typical. He was probably still at work, or maybe he just didn't want to be around when this happened. I stood there, every muscle in my body trembling. Years of silence, of swallowing my own feelings for the sake of keeping the peace, were suddenly pressing against my ribs. She thought she could just take what was mine. She had no idea who she was dealing with. But to understand how we got here, let me start from the beginning. When my husband passed away 6 years ago, this house became both my anchor and my refuge. Every corner carried a memory. The creak in the hallway was from the night we danced barefoot after he got home from his last shift. The kitchen smelled faintly of the cinnamon bread he used to love. It was my safe place. I never imagined it would someday feel like someone else's territory. When my son Daniel told me he and his new wife were moving in for a little while, I didn't hesitate. He was my only child, and after everything we'd been through as a family, the idea of having company in this big old house didn't scare me. In fact, it made me feel needed again. He'd said, "Just until we save enough for a down payment, Mom, maybe a year." That was almost 2 years ago. At first it was fine, really fine. Emily, my daughter-in-law, smiled sweetly, brought flowers, and insisted on helping with dinner. She complimented my cooking. She said things like, "This house has such good energy, and I love how homey it feels." I wanted to believe she meant it. I wanted so badly to keep the peace. But slowly, it started to change. The first time was about the couch. My husband and I had bought it together 30 years ago, a sturdy, deep blue piece with wooden legs and a few scratches that made it ours. One afternoon I came home from visiting my friend Marlene and found the couch gone. In its place was a white, modern thing that looked like it belonged in a furniture catalog, not a home. Emily popped her head out of the kitchen. "Oh, hey, I hope you don't mind. The old one didn't really go with the vibe I'm creating, but don't worry, I moved it to the garage for now." The vibe she was creating, I told myself not to make a scene. It was just a couch, right? She'd said for now. Then came the kitchen. It had always been my kingdom. My mugs on the top shelf, spices organized the way I liked them, recipes tucked into the drawer near the stove. One morning, I walked in and couldn't find anything. My favorite red mug was gone, replaced by matching white porcelain cups. My spice rack had been rearranged alphabetically. "Emily," I said carefully, "where did my mug go?" She laughed lightly. "Oh, I donated some of the old stuff. It was kind of cluttered. I figured it's better this way. Streamlined." Cluttered, that word burned into me. Daniel overheard us and gave me that look, the one that begged me not to start a fight. "Mom, it's just a mug," he said softly later that night. "She's just trying to make it nice." I swallowed it, like I'd swallowed so many small hurts before. It didn't stop there. She brought in her own curtains. She painted the entryway beige without asking. She started hosting girls' nights with her friends every other Friday, turning the living room into a cocktail bar. I'd sit in my bedroom, listening to laughter echo down the hallway, feeling like a guest in the home I'd built. Marlene, my neighbor of 20 years, noticed it before I did. One morning, as we stood by the fence pruning roses, she leaned closer and whispered, "She's making herself real comfortable in there, isn't she?" I forced a laugh, brushing soil off my gloves. "It's fine. She's young. She just likes things her way." Marlene gave me the kind of look only old friends can give. the one that says, I know you're lying to yourself. The breaking points came in trickles, not waves. One Sunday, she called her mother over without asking me first. Her mother, a sharp woman with a permanently raised eyebrow, walked around the house like she was inspecting a property she'd just bought. This could use a remodel, she said at one point, running her hand along my kitchen counter. Emily laughed like it was a shared joke. I felt my chest tighten, but I smiled. I always smile. For Daniel. There were quiet moments at night when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying all these small intrusions. She's not malicious, I told myself. She's just young. This will pass. But it didn't pass. It grew roots. Emily began introducing the house to guests as if it were hers. Welcome to our home, she'd say with her perfectly manicured hand sweeping across the room. When people complimented the garden, she'd say, I spend so much time out here, even though she'd never once pruned a rosebush in her life. I remember the day she hung a giant canvas of her and Daniel's wedding photo in the hallway, the spot where my husband's portrait used to hang. When I asked where the old photo had gone, she said, oh, it didn't fit the aesthetic. That night I cried quietly in my room, not because of the photo itself, but because of what it meant. Piece by piece, she was erasing me. I kept hoping Daniel would see it, would say something, but he didn't. He wasn't cruel, just passive. He'd grown up kind, gentle, but if avoiding a fight meant letting Emily have her way, that's exactly what he did. And I loved him too much to make him choose between us. But something deep inside me began to shift. I noticed how her voice carried through the house like she owned it, how her things slowly migrated from their room into common spaces, how every decision, big or small, somehow became hers to make. And as much as I tried to keep the peace, a quiet unease settled in my chest. Not loud, not explosive, just a steady, suffocating weight. It was the beginning of the end. I didn't know it then, but those little moments were seeds of something bigger, something she'd regret planting. The day everything snapped wasn't loud. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors, no dramatic confrontations, just the key turning in a lock, my tired feet stepping over the threshold, and a single sentence that changed everything. It was early September, warm enough that the air inside the house felt heavy. I had just returned from spending 5 days at my sister Ingrid's place in Hamburg. Ingrid isn't just my sister. She's my anchor, the one person who tells me the truth, even when it stings. When I left, I remember locking my bedroom door out of habit, the same way I always did when I went away for more than a night. It wasn't because I didn't trust them. It was because that room was the only space that still felt like mine. When I stepped inside the house, I immediately noticed something was off. The entryway smelled different, not like the faint lavender I usually sprayed before leaving, but like someone had drenched the place in expensive perfume. It wasn't mine. My suitcase wheels clicked softly on the floor as I walked down the hallway. I turned the corner toward my room and froze. My door, the one I'd locked, was wide open. For a second, I thought maybe Daniel had needed something, but then I saw the boxers, stacked neatly against the wall, her floral robe draped over my armchair, my bedside lamp replaced with something modern and shiny, and there she was, sitting on the edge of my bed like a queen on her throne. She didn't even flinch. Oh, you're back early, Emily said casually, scrolling on her phone. My hands clenched around the handle of my suitcase. Why is my door open? I asked. She looked up with that same smug half-smile. Oh, Daniel had a spare key. I needed more space. The guest room was too small. This just makes more sense. You can have the other room from now on. It's fine. You can have the other room. She said it like she was offering me a piece of gum. I stared at her, my throat tightening. Emily, this is my bedroom. She stood up slowly, placing her phone on the dresser. My dresser. Well, technically, it's all of our house, isn't it? We live here too, and the guest room is closer to the kitchen. It's more practical for you. Practical. The word stung worse than anything. My eyes flicked around the room. My personal belongings had been shoved into 2 cardboard boxes stacked in the corner. My nightstand was empty. My books were gone. Even my late husband's watch, which had sat on top of the dresser for years, was nowhere to be seen. Where are my things? My voice came out lower than I expected. Oh, I packed them up for you, she said, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. They're safe. Don't worry. I even put the watch in the top drawer so it wouldn't get scratched. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her. But all I did was stand there, completely still, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. Does Daniel know about this? I asked finally. She smiled, that awful, condescending smile. Of course he does. I told him last night. He said he'd talk to you when you got back. No call, no message, nothing. My son had let her do this behind my back. A part of me broke in that moment, not loudly, quietly, like a porcelain cup hitting the floor in slow motion. I didn't cry. Not yet, Emily, I whispered. This room belonged to me and my husband. I've slept here for over 30 years. This is my space. Her tone sharpened. And now it's mine. You'll be more comfortable in the guest room. It's better for everyone. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I took a step back, like her words had physically shoved me. I could see the faint satisfaction in her eyes. She wanted to claim this house. She'd been building up to this moment all along. And I had been too blind or too polite to stop her. I turned away because I couldn't bear to let her see me crumble. I walked down the hallway to the guest room, my suitcase still rolling behind me, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The guest room smelled like stale air. My boxers were already stacked neatly inside, like this had all been carefully planned. She hadn't just taken my room, she'd relocated me. I sat down on the edge of the bed and finally let the tears fall silently. Like a faucet I couldn't turn off, my husband's face flashed in my mind. You built this house with your hands, I thought, and now you're being pushed out of it. The worst part wasn't Emily, it was Daniel's silence. That night, when he came home, I didn't confront him right away. I waited until after dinner, when she disappeared upstairs. I was sitting at the kitchen table, hands clasped so tightly together my knuckles ached. Daniel, I said quietly, why didn't you call me? He froze in the doorway. His hair was slightly messy from work, his tie loosened. He looked tired. He always looked tired lately. I didn't want to upset you, he mumbled. Upset me? My voice cracked. She moved me out of my room without asking. She didn't mean it like that, Mom. It's just practical. You're closer to the kitchen now, and stop saying practical, I snapped. I'd never raised my voice to him like that before. His eyes widened. This isn't about convenience, Daniel. This is about respect. My room, my house, and you let her do it. His shoulders slumped. I didn't know how to say no. That sentence told me everything. He wasn't my little boy anymore. The one who used to run down the hallway with scraped knees and a grin. He was a grown man who had chosen silence over standing up for me when he went upstairs. I sat there alone in the kitchen for hours. I stared at the blank wall, listening to muffled laughter coming from my bedroom upstairs. My son's voice, her voice, like I didn't exist anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I walked through the house like a ghost, my bare feet brushing against floors I'd polished for decades. I touched the doorframe where my husband had once measured Daniel's height each year on his birthday. The pencil marks were still faintly there. And then, I saw something that nearly shattered me. The wedding photo, the one that had sat on my bedside table for years, was in the trash. It wasn't even just tossed like an empty box. My husband's smile, our young faces, the proof of everything we'd built, discarded. I picked it up with shaking hands, wiped the dust off the glass, and held it against my chest. Something inside me hardened in that moment. The sadness turned into something else, something colder, sharper. I whispered to the dark hallway, no more. It wasn't just about a room. It wasn't about furniture or curtains. It was about the last piece of my life they thought they could take without consequence. The next morning, I smiled at Emily over breakfast. She thought she'd won. She had no idea. That was the moment I knew I had to act. The day after she took my room, everything inside me changed. For years, I had bitten my tongue, convinced myself that silence was strength, that patience would eventually earn me respect. But respect isn't handed to you by people who enjoy taking. It's taken back, and I was done waiting for my son or anyone else to defend me. That morning, I brewed my coffee a little slower. I watched the steam rise from the cup like a quiet signal to myself. This is the beginning. Emily chirped around the kitchen in her usual way, acting as if nothing had happened. She even wore one of my old aprons. I smiled politely, but something behind my smile had changed. I started with the most important thing, the house. My husband and I had bought it together in 1989. When he passed, everything legally transferred to me. I'd never thought twice about that piece of paper in my file cabinet, but now, it was everything. I waited until she left for her yoga class and Daniel was at work. I went into my small home office, opened the old oak filing cabinet, and pulled out the thick envelope marked house deed and mortgage. Seeing my husband's handwriting on it made my hands tremble. I took a deep breath and unfolded the documents. Every word reminded me this place was mine. The next day, I made an appointment with an old friend, Carl, who had worked as a real estate attorney for over 30 years. He and his late wife used to come over for dinner every Christmas. When I walked into his small office, he immediately saw through my polite smile. "What's going on, Anna?" he asked, pushing his glasses up his nose. I told him everything, not dramatically, just the facts. How my daughter-in-law had taken over my house piece by piece, how my son had gone quiet, and how the final blow came when she claimed my bedroom. Carl didn't interrupt, he just listened, the way old friends do. When I was done, he said, "Anna, you need to protect what's yours," quietly, strategically. We went through legal options step by step. He confirmed that since the house was solely in my name, neither Daniel nor Emily had any legal claim to it, and if things escalated, I had every right to ask them to leave. We discussed wills, power of attorney, property transfer options, everything that could secure me against whatever they might try. I walked out of his office feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. But legal paperwork wasn't enough. Emily didn't just want a room, she wanted power. So I started taking back mine in ways she wouldn't even notice at first. I opened a new savings account, one Daniel didn't know about. I transferred a portion of my emergency funds there. I also changed the locks on my filing cabinet and put all my key documents in a safe deposit box at the bank. At night, when the house was quiet, I sat at the kitchen table making a list. Not an angry list, a strategic one. Meet with Carl. Again, draft property protection paperwork. Call locksmith. Schedule rekeying for entire house. Notify Daniel in writing, not verbally. Closing parenthesis. Plan. Dinner confrontation. Timing crucial. Pack their things before confrontation. Day. I must have rewritten that list 5 times, each time feeling calmer, clearer. It wasn't about rage anymore. It was about boundaries, real ones. There were moments of doubt. Late at night, I'd lie in that cold guest bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing their laughter echoing from my room upstairs. Was I really ready to do this? Was I ready to hurt my son to protect myself? But then I'd picture my husband's watch, my wedding photo in the trash, and Emily's voice saying, "This is mine now." And my hesitation would dissolve like fog in sunlight. I also called Marlene, my neighbor, and told her part of the story. Not everything, just enough. She squeezed my hand and said, "Anna, it's about time." That simple sentence meant more to me than she ever knew. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly put everything in place. The locks were scheduled to be changed on a Thursday morning, while both of them were at work. Carl would have the legal notice ready by then. I even cleaned out the garage, boxing up their extra furniture, and labeling everything neatly. No screaming, no scenes, just order. The night before the confrontation, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. I wasn't the timid woman who let others take her space anymore. My reflection looked calm, resolute, almost frighteningly so. "I'm not moving anymore," I whispered to my own eyes. "They are." I turned off the light, climbed into the guest bed for what I knew would be the last night I'd ever sleep there, and let the silence settle around me. I knew I had to be smart about this, and I was. The morning everything changed, started quietly, almost suspiciously so. No banging doors, no humming from Emily, no sound of Daniel rushing out with his half-packed work bag, just sunlight leaking through the curtains and the faint rustle of autumn leaves outside. It felt calm, but inside me, something thrummed with sharp purpose. I'd spent weeks preparing for this. I wasn't improvising. I wasn't guessing. Every step had been written down, reviewed, and timed. Thursday morning at 9 a.m. was the moment everything turned out. At exactly 8:55. A white van pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a sturdy man in his late 40s with a ring of keys on his belt, the locksmith. I opened the door before he even knocked. "Mrs. Bauer?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, steady and clear. He smiled politely. "This won't take long." By 9:40, every lock in the house had been changed. Front door, back door, windows, even the sliding door that Emily loved to leave slightly ajar when she had her friends over. I held the new set of keys in my hand, heavier than I expected, like a tangible piece of my freedom. The locksmith left, and the house was silent again. I walked through it slowly, deliberately, touching the door frames, the furniture, the walls. For the first time in months, it felt like mine again. I moved their boxers down from my old bedroom with the help of Marlene's son. He didn't ask questions. Marlene had told him enough. We stacked their clothes, decorations, and Emily's endless pile of aesthetic junk neatly in the living room. No malice, just precision. Then I went upstairs to my bedroom. My bedroom. Her perfume still lingered faintly, but her things were gone. The quilt my husband and I had chosen together all those years ago was back in its place. The framed photo of our wedding day sat on the nightstand again, like it had never been thrown away. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Welcome home." At 5:30 p.m., I heard Daniel's car pull up. 10 minutes later, hers. I didn't move. I sat calmly at the dining table, a mug of tea in my hand and an envelope beside me, the legal notice Carl had helped me draft. I heard the sound of the doorknob jiggle, then again, then harder. Emily's voice, sharp and incredulous. "Why won't this open?" Daniel's voice followed, lower but tense. "Did you lock it?" "No, it's not the same key." My lips curled into the faintest smile. I stood up slowly, walked to the door, and unlocked it from the inside. When I opened it, they were standing on the porch with grocery bags and matching confused faces. "Evening," I said pleasantly. Emily pushed past me without asking. "What the hell happened to the lock?" "I changed it," I said simply, closing the door behind them. "Come in. We need to talk." Daniel looked uneasy. "Mom, why?" I didn't answer. Instead, I gestured toward the living room. When they walked in and saw all their things stacked neatly in boxes, the color drained from Emily's face. "What is this?" she hissed. I sat down at the table again, motioning for them to do the same. Daniel stayed standing, looking between me and the boxers like he was caught between two versions of reality. Emily crossed her arms, clearly preparing for a fight. "This is your 30-day notice," I said, sliding the envelope across the table. Daniel frowned. 30-day notice, for what? "For both of you to move out," I replied evenly. Emily let out a bitter laugh. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I am." My voice was calm. "Too calm. This is my house. My name is the only one on the deed. Carl, my lawyer, confirmed it. You have no legal claim to stay here without my permission. And my permission," I leaned forward slightly, "is officially revoked." Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Mom, please, this is extreme. We can talk." "No, Daniel." I cut him off. "We should have talked months ago, when she started replacing furniture without asking, when she rearranged the kitchen, when she threw away my wedding photo, when she moved me out of my room like I was an unwanted guest. But we didn't talk then, did we? Because you stayed silent." Emily's voice turned sharp. "This is ridiculous. We're family. You can't just throw us out like strangers." I tilted my head, meeting her glare with quiet steel. "Family doesn't treat people like strangers in their own home. And yes, Emily, I can." For the first time since I'd known her, she looked unsure, not defeated, just shaken. She glanced at Daniel, expecting him to jump in, but he didn't, not right away. "Mom, please," he finally said softly. "Where are we supposed to go?" I took a slow breath. "You have 30 days. That's more than fair. You're both working. You've both known for a long time this wasn't permanent. Consider this your deadline to make other arrangements." Emily slammed her hands on the table. "You're doing this because you're jealous. You couldn't stand that the house finally felt alive again." I stood up, not yelling but firm. "No, Emily. I'm doing this because I refused to disappear in my own home. I gave you my hospitality, my trust, and my patience. You gave me disrespect, and that ends today." Silence filled the room like thick smoke. Daniel stared at the floor. Emily paced like a trapped animal, muttering under her breath. Then came the twist she hadn't expected. "I've already transferred ownership of this house into a living trust in my name," I continued. "And if anything happens to me, it doesn't go to Daniel automatically. It goes into a protected fund. I made sure you can't touch it, Emily. Not 1 cent. Not one room. Not one wall." Her face turned white. "You what?" "You heard me." The next few minutes felt like hours. Daniel tried reasoning with me. Emily threatened, begged, and snapped, but I didn't waver. Not once. Finally, Daniel slumped onto the couch, one of her couches that she'd brought in. "Emily, let's just talk about this later," he said. His voice was tired, defeated. She looked at him like he'd betrayed her, then spun on her heel and stormed upstairs, my old room. Or, at least, she thought it still was. A second later, I heard the door slam and the sound of the handle rattling. She couldn't get in. I leaned back in my chair and took a slow sip of my tea. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. Over the next week, things changed quickly. Emily tried to assert control the way she always had. but it was like yelling into a locked door. She no longer had keys, no longer had authority. Every attempt to intimidate me met with quiet, unwavering boundaries. When she brought her mother over to talk some sense into me, I simply handed her a printed copy of the legal notice and shut the door. When she tried to guilt Daniel into siding with her, I reminded him, gently but clearly, that he was free to stay with her wherever they found a new place together. The house grew quieter, less chaotic. Their laughter upstairs turned into whispered arguments. Then boxes started disappearing one by one. 2 weeks later, Daniel knocked on the kitchen door while I was having my morning tea. He stood there, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes red. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. He was my son, my only child, and despite everything, I still loved him. But love doesn't mean letting someone trample you. "I know," I said quietly. He exhaled shakily. "We found a place. We'll move out next week." I nodded. "Good." Emily barely looked at me after that. Her arrogance had cracked, replaced by a sour silence. On the last day, when the moving truck pulled away, she muttered something under her breath, something about how cold I was. I didn't answer. I just stood at the window, holding my mug, watching my house become mine again with every box that left. When the door finally shut behind them, the silence was different this time. Not heavy, not lonely, just peaceful. I walked upstairs, opened my bedroom door, and stepped inside. Everything was back the way it belonged. My quilts, my books, my photo on the nightstand. I sat down on the edge of the bed, exhaled slowly, and whispered, "Welcome home." And just like that, the woman who once treated my house like a stage prop was out of the story, and I was no longer playing a supporting role. The house was quiet again, not the kind of heavy silence that used to settle over me at night when I lay awake feeling displaced, but a warm, soft quiet, the kind that wrapped itself around me like a blanket. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I didn't have to brace myself when I came home. I didn't have to check whether the couch had been moved, or whether the kitchen smelled like someone else's perfume. This was my home again. The morning after they left, I made myself a pot of coffee, set out my favorite red mug, the one Emily had called clutter, and opened the curtains. The sun spilled into the kitchen just the way it used to when my husband was alive. The air smelled like coffee, not floral candles or air freshener. It was simple, familiar. I walked through the house slowly, almost reverently. My wedding photo was back in its place, my books on their shelves, my spices in the order I liked them. It wasn't just about furniture. It was about presence. My presence. Every object in this house now belonged where it was meant to be. The neighborhood felt it, too. Marlene dropped by that afternoon with a basket of plum cake, wearing the kind of smile that says, "I told you so," without needing to speak. "I can breathe again when I see this house," she joked. I laughed, a real laugh this time, not the polite one I used to give to keep up appearances. "Me too," I admitted. She sat at my kitchen table and listened as I told her everything. From the moment I walked in that day and saw Emily in my room, to the night I handed them the 30-day notice. When I finished, she leaned forward and squeezed my hand. "Anna, you've always been the kind woman who puts everyone else first," she said softly. "It's about time you put yourself there." Her words stuck with me long after she left. Of course, not everything was simple after they moved out. Daniel and I didn't talk for 2 weeks. It wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because he needed to process what had happened. I'd hurt him in a way he wasn't expecting. I'd drawn a line he never thought I would. But I wasn't going to chase him when he finally called. It was late in the evening. His voice was softer than usual, stripped of all the passive indifference that used to hang in it. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Hi, Daniel." There was a pause. "I didn't protect you the way I should have." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "I know," I said, honestly. "But I also know you're not a bad person. You just forgot who I was for a while." He exhaled shakily. "She pushed me into everything, but that doesn't excuse it. I saw what she was doing, and I did nothing." I could hear the guilt in his voice. He wasn't looking for forgiveness, not yet. He was acknowledging the truth, and that was enough. "I love you," I said softly. "I love you too, Mom." He came by the following Sunday. We sat on the porch drinking coffee, just like we used to. There were no forced smiles, no tension lingering in the air, just two people trying to rebuild something fragile but real. He didn't defend her anymore. He didn't make excuses. He just listened. "I don't know what's going to happen between us," he admitted quietly, "but I want to fix it. I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said, "but I won't lose myself again either." That conversation was the beginning of a new chapter between us. Not perfect, just honest. Emily, on the other hand, didn't speak to me again. Not once. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was furious, convinced I had humiliated her. But I didn't care. She had underestimated me. She thought I'd be too afraid to act. She was wrong. I started taking back more than just rooms. I signed up for a painting class at the community center. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. I spent afternoons in the garden with Marlene, trimming roses and talking about everything except the past. I even repainted the hallway myself, a soft, warm yellow. It made the whole house feel lighter. I also made some final, quiet legal decisions. The house remained in my living trust, but I added a clause ensuring Daniel could inherit it only under specific conditions. Conditions that would prevent anyone else from pushing me out of my own life ever again. One night, as I sat alone in the living room with a cup of tea, I realized something profound. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had been replaced by something steadier, quieter, peace. A peace I had earned, and maybe the house felt it, too. The creaks were familiar, the air softer, the quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. Looking back, I don't regret a single thing I did. Not the locksmith, not the legal notice, not the silence afterward. I had spent years putting everyone else first, and for once, I had chosen myself. That choice changed everything. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd throw my own son and his wife out of this house, I would have laughed. I've always been the kind of woman who kept quiet, who let things slide for the sake of family peace. I thought love meant tolerance. I thought patience would eventually be rewarded. I was wrong. Love does not mean erasing yourself. I look around now at my living room, the quilt on my bed, the kitchen shelves lined with my own mugs again, and I realize just how much of myself I had given up piece by piece without even noticing. It didn't happen all at once. It happened quietly, and that's the danger of it. People like Emily count on your silence. They mistake kindness for weakness. Taking my house back wasn't about cruelty. It was about drawing a line. It was about saying, this is mine, and I have a right to it. For years, I thought that setting boundaries would make me lose the people I love. But the truth is, if they love you back, they'll learn to respect them. And if they don't, then maybe you're not really losing anything at all. Daniel and I are slowly finding our way again. It's not easy, but when we sit on the porch now, I can see in his eyes that he finally understands. He sees me as a person again, not just a place to live. Emily may have underestimated me, but I think Daniel underestimated me too. And that's okay, because I'll never let anyone underestimate me again. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to this to remember, it's this. You are not obligated to shrink in your own home, in your own life. Have you ever let someone slowly take from you, bit by bit, until one day you realized you were standing on the outside looking in? If you have, I hope you find the courage to take it back. I did, and I'll never apologize for it.